the day I met Verity Walker was the day my grandmother exploded.
Difficult second album here.
Yeah, I'm really actually quite worried about this.
Yep, it's our second podcast. If you've tuned in because you were here under the promise that we would teach you how to make a business podcast, well, you'd be right, we are.
That's good.
But what we're going to do first is run you through what happened after our first podcast went out. Now, if you don't care about this, we'll tell you what time to skip to in the video now.
Skip now to 3 minutes and 17 seconds.
But if you do care and you're interested what happens when someone releases their first ever podcast, then stick about.
Hang about, here it comes.
All right, Dave?
It wasn't too bad.
No.
Go on, hit me with some stats.
Ooh, look at those stats.
Interestingly, put it out, not record-breaking downloads or views, 90, which actually isn't that bad.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's 89 more than normal as well. So that's promising.
Yeah.
So basically we got emails, which is a good sign, from seeing it, saying how much they enjoyed it. One was across the sea from America. A real-life American got in contact. Phone calls from people saying how much they enjoyed listening and they were listening during their lunch, their whole lunch break. Someone even said that they were going to listen but started watching it and couldn't stop.
If you have lunch breaks that are only 20 minutes long.
It's perfect.
It's perfect sandwich eating time.
Yeah, and that's the industry I think we're after now.
The sandwich
The
eating.
sandwich eater,
Yeah.
which is why today's episode is sponsored by Subway.
Finally.
The social snippets, little video clips we made to promote it, to put on social media, they worked really well. They got shared. We ended up in an online paper. And yeah, they worked really well on LinkedIn and views and stuff. So pretty happy. And possibly the highest accolade was my friends who have never said anything nice to me ever said it was actually quite good. So he even listened to it and they downloaded it. And one said he'd listened to this week's as well.
I think quit while you're ahead and get new friends. Because you've had that one high.
How easy do you think it's going to make for me to make new
Actually,
friends?
that's true. Hang on to them.
These guys tolerate
for
me.
dear life.
Now, I know this is the thing that you were really happy about because I spent a whole show trying to convince you that podcasting was the way. And what the stats are saying is 60 people watched it on YouTube. Everyone else listened to it.
You see, that's the thing that kind of cracked me up because I'm personally, was a bit apprehensive about this. Like, well, hang on, we sell videos, so it's not going to work. But the video version of the podcast did way better than just the podcast alone. It's great, right?
Yeah, it was more... It had,
And unexpected.
Yeah, unexpected. People did listen. Both of them had the average sort of rate of retention, which was around the 57% mark, which is very good online, believe it or not. It might sound rubbish, but it's actually very good. But the most interesting thing was that, yeah, the video was the thing that people watched. It's like a 16-minute video. That's quite long. And I know a lot of people got to the end. And also, what's good is it started to move up the ranks on YouTube because of the average viewer duration, which is good. It's how things rank. So we're starting to get little views snip in.
So video helped the radio star.
That's it. I
You heard it here first.
I feel a jingle coming on.
Podcasting killed the video star, but then it fought back and it didn't get far.
A couple of things we learned that I would say, if you're making your own, this is where the show kind of starts for you.
Welcome back. If you've just skipped that whole section,
Yeah,
good to have
welcome back. You need about 3 to 5 episodes to start off with as like a bed. So people just don't really. We should have had 3. The recommendation of that, especially online, they will say the same thing. Start off with 3 to 5 episodes in the bank, so that when people do discover you, there's more to dip in and watch. So that was our first
because
mistake. Otherwise they complain apparently and say I wanted more. Not to us personally, but another person who has a podcast had a complaint because he didn't have enough podcasts.
We've not built up a bed or bank of podcasts. We put out one and didn't get any complaints,
Which
suggested the content wasn't that good for them to complain about. That's what I thought. I felt left out, that no one complained.
I'm happy with the stats. I mean, if it gets to the stage where people are complaining there's not enough, you've reached a new level of genius.
Yeah, right.
And I think
okay.
we're miles off that. So this guy must have been.
Basically, we haven't peaked yet, so that's great. I'd hope not after one podcast.
I would hope so too. Another faux pas is that it takes 4 to 5 days to get listed on iTunes. I thought you just sort of click a button and you'd be up. They have to vet it. So our show that went out on the Thursday, it was 5 days late on iTunes, so we didn't really get to experience ultimate
God, we're
downloads.
late already. We've only just started.
So take that into consideration. Measuring's a pain because the advice out there is put it on every platform you can, but then you've got like 8 different platforms to go back and measure on. So that was annoying. Length seemed about right. Yeah.
Well, the feedback was right, but you always go off the stats. And anecdotally, yes, it seemed to be right. You always go off the stats of engagement, which are not watertight yet because we haven't got all the stats in. All the platforms don't record them at the same time for us.
From the stats we've got are good.
Yeah.
I can only go on them.
So over 50% all the way through, which is apparently quite good for a podcast.
General rule of thumb for a 2-minute video is if it's
yeah.
over 65% engagement, it's working.
Yeah,
For a 16-minute one, over 50, that's a good sign.
it's a good sign.
So let's pat ourselves on the back.
Right, padding, bit of padding.
Not too hard.
And rubbing my neck at the same time
That's
because I'm a bit
disgusting.
itchy.
Yep, good. And that's it, really.
Ooh, look at those stats.
Right, so let's get cracking onto how to make a business podcast.
Yep.
Before we do, just because sometimes stuff's boring, I thought we'd make it more interesting. We'll play a game throughout the whole episode, right? And I know you're going to like this because I was watching a video the other day and an 18-year-old girl was doing an advert for a video platform. She's obviously some sort of influencer or something. And she said the advert was like, oh, I'm on TikTok now, which is like a Vine-esque app. I'm going to be releasing loads of great content every day. And I thought, children are calling video content. Like marketing is creeping into children.
We're just turning them into the perfect consumers.
So
You
it made me
already
feel a
are.
bit sick. You've noticed the word content being used for just for anything.
I think, you know what I think it's like, that word point that Americans use when they say price point. Another way of saying price point is price. The price is this, right? I think it's the same. You could not use the word content. You could say, I've been writing.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
So we'll ban the word content from this. We have to put in other words. You can use the word content if it applies to multiple mediums. So if everyone else does this, maybe we'll save children from the evil of content.
I think that would be a huge achievement.
Content. Whatever you do, don't say content. Content. Oh no! I just said content.
First thing you need to do if you want to make a business podcast, Dave, what do you think it is?
I think you need to get a name for the podcast.
Before that,
Before that, I don't know.
you need a goal. Why are you doing this? What do you think our goals are?
Get more podcasts made.
Oh, well, that's
Quite
a result.
specific.
Maybe I'll just answer my own questions for now and you can just chip in every now and then.
Well, should we start this bit
Well,
again?
no, I'm enjoying watching you humiliate yourself. So our goals, right, is to generate awareness, right? So it'd be nice if more people knew about us for the right reasons, hopefully. I want to differentiate. Do you know what I like about having a podcast, even though we've got one episode, is that now on our footer, on our website, there's a button that says download on iTunes. And the very fact that we can use the Apple logo on our site,
Is the credibility.
it makes us look like we're somebody's
Right, vis-a-vis
when we're not.
credibility.
Yeah.
Right.
So just release one podcast and put that download on iTunes and you'll instantly look better than you are. So that's a bit of free advice.
I suspect that our goal, which we did talk about early on, and it seems to have become more of a list of different things, but it was to communicate clearly and show, hopefully inspire some people to communicate clearly themselves in their business, not just for themselves.
I don't think your goal should be
Yeah.
to generate millions of pounds from podcast. Although the Joe Rogan podcast, found this out the other day, $47 million a year he generates.
Just by himself. Do you think there's no costs either? Because it's just a laptop.
All right, turns out when you start getting 100 million downloads, it gets very expensive to host. But we're not quite there. Once you've established your goal, which could be different for every business, you got to pick your niche, right? So ideally, and this is how I'm looking at niche, is the
Well, that's
more
niche if you're in America.
the more niche or niche you go, the better, right? So you
Niche.
want to go to a level of niche where there's less competition for that exact niche because there'll be less search terms, but somewhere in there'll be a really concentrated audience of the people that you want to listen.
Right, but we're not doing that.
No, we're not doing that.
But that is what you should do.
That is what you should do, and then develop. Now what you need is a format, and this is the bit that if without it, it's not going to work, is it? Now, what do we mean by format, David?
Structure. Some sort of plan by which there's relatively similar things happen in every podcast. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy. You're trying to make a totally new thing every time.
The interview's a great one because it's them, it's all
Yeah.
information. You can harness their audience, get them on board, lovely jubbly.
By the way, you don't have to. You can have just a chat show-ish, but even within that, there's got to be segments.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we learned pretty quick was chaptering.
So
right?
that's moves me on to number 2, format style, news. Yeah, that's quite a good one because all the content ideas are given to you by the world.
It is good, but of course you've got to remember that in a year's time, say, if someone's popping in and now picking up on your podcast and things may be out of date. So you'll be careful. I think if you can pick subjects that are maybe current but are going to have a perennial nature, then fine.
I'm going to cross that off the list. Well done, folks. You just eliminated a format.
Well, no,
from the
because I
list.
mean, look,
No,
I listened to Chopper's Brexit podcast, and he's got stuff coming out every week, and it is on a subject that is in theory going to evaporate. But it's been around for I think 4 years now. So
yeah, but
in the
in
lead
10
up
years'
to the
time,
vote and
you're not
after.
going to get your kids and go, "Come on, let's all sit down and listen to the Brexit podcast. This one's a classic."
To be fair, I could go back through, say, Tim Ferriss's back catalogue and listen to tons of stuff there.
So don't waste your time on news. Forget that one. Let's get rid of that. We've done that.
I'm glad we talked about it.
Educational, which is kind of what we're fitting into right now. So teaching, discussing. Again, you can do it like this, get a guest on. And then there's the scripted one, which is basically an audiobook. And these are kind of different styles that you can adopt. Now, we'd always recommend here, I think, interview. Again, it's not what we're doing, but it will make your life a lot easier, won't it? Having someone on, getting their knowledge, using their audience, distribute it.
I was going to say the big
Everyone's
thing
laughing.
there is, of course, their audience. And that is part of your growth as a podcast, of course, to
need
look
it.
for different audiences that you can piggyback. And as you grow, of course, other guests that come on are going to piggyback off yours and so on.
The moment we can find someone who's willing to tarnish their credibility to come on with us, we'll do it.
Yeah.
Pick a style, practice, perfect. The 3 Ps.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Just made
This
that
is
up.
just like arithmetic,
Yeah.
except the 3
Pick.
R's.
Practice, perfect.
Right, okay.
Okay. Now,
Not 3 R's.
this is something that is key just to making people pay attention. And it's the shopper's pivot.
Right, yes.
And we do this in video, don't we?
We're just in video. You've got to have a pattern interrupt of some sort. And just like novelists have a great first line in their novel, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, that sort of thing. Or my all-time favourite, Ian Banks in Crow Road, was the day I met Verity Walker was the day my grandmother exploded. Best first line ever in a novel.
I automatically want to know what happened next.
Exactly.
So that worked so well.
So that's a shopper's pivot.
That is what it's designed. Yeah, that's exactly what it's about. It's make you go, what? Oh, I want more of that.
Yeah. Now you can always make a better one, but the fact is most people don't even know that idea exists. And if you make even a halfway effort, you're going to pattern interrupt people to consider what happens next. Now, I should say, you can't just say any old nonsense, really. It should be in context.
We did last time.
We did last time, actually. We probably scared some people off. But you really should be looking at how do you offer a sneak preview into the context of what's going to unfold, and then make sure you deliver on that promise, and you'll satisfy people's appetites.
So coming up with these is quite tough if you're writing them. Best thing to do when you're making your podcast is when you've done it and you're editing it, go and find the most interesting bit, or which is slightly absurd or has a bit of a cliffhanger, whack that straight at the front, then hit them with a jingle, off you go. And it's like, oh, this is the sign of things to come.
Yeah.
I
So
think
don't
that
have to be conscious about it at the beginning. Good if you can write in something there if you know it's going to work, but yeah, leave it otherwise to the edit.
All right, and then what we came on to then was jingles. So our first one, without the jingles and the stuff cutting it up, just was really long-winded and dull.
Yeah.
Adding them in, broke it into little chapters, which without them, when I watched it, I was like, oh man, this sucks. So it gives the listener or the viewer a little bit of a break, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when you're reading a book, you want to have those moments to just absorb what's occurred and also feel like you're in the hands of somebody who is structuring this deliberately, not just a ramble.
Exactly.
Although there is a little bit of that.
That's what separates from the ramble. Yeah. And also probably just gives people less of a headache having a break listening to us. So that's more of a health benefit.
It is.
For your listeners as well. So that's your format. I was listening to one of Neil Patel's podcasts and his guest had a cold and he was like,
sorry, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, a bit blocked up. But we'll go over the show anyway.
And so Neil Patel starts talking. And you just hear this bloke sniffing. Then he blows his nose. And I was like, just turn his mic off. We don't need to hear him blow his nose. And don't do that in your podcast, that's for sure.
And also, Why not edit some of that out?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
It
know.
doesn't really add value.
If
That's
only
the other term we're going to get rid of.
have we said the C word yet? We're doing really well.
We are doing really well.
Preparation now. There's a lot of lightweight material. Oh, almost said the C word out there. So research, get as much info as you can. The internet is a marvelous thing, Dave. There's a lot out there. So if you
It
know,
is
if
marvellous.
you think you know something, there's
Yeah.
a strong chance just by googling it, you'll find out some stories. Really important. And get more information. Just get as informative as you can, really.
Yeah,
Nice
actually,
little sheet.
what's the sort of litmus test where you know it's not quite there yet? If you listened to the first sort of draft, or not listened, but went through your first draft and you went, I kind of had a hunch that I knew all this before, then probably you've not gone deep enough. How about that? What's a way to know?
If you get to the end and you think, is my dream client going to look at this and go, do you know what? I didn't know that. It's exactly the solution to the problem I was looking for. And they've just shown me exactly how to get rid of it. These are the people for me. Or are they going to go
I vaguely knew that anyway.
and just sort of stare into the abyss, sort of dribbling? You need to then prep your guest if you're doing an interview, right? So Skype them, have a call with them, run through it. Believe it or not, this is probably the third time we've done this. We talked through it. Just make sure they're ready because they're going to be nervous on the day, probably. Work out the best questions. Yeah, and practice. Practice, Dave. I don't know if you know this. Do you know what it makes?
Who'd have thunk it?
Perfect.
Or
Or just
not
better than
quite,
bad. Yeah, so in our case. So once you've practiced, now what you need is a nice little sort of document in front of you like this.
Yeah.
If it's just an audio podcast, no one can see that you're reading notes or looking at it. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. You've got to bullet point it, but you don't want to be writing too much information because you don't want to be reading here, do you?
No, that's it. I mean, these are what you've done. If I'm to reveal that, is there's bullet points there that
We are
are
gonna
talking
reveal it.
points. You know, that's the whole
We'll
point.
put this on.
We're going to put this up.
We'll
aren't
put
we?
this up.
Yeah.
If you listen,
Go and have a look.
have a look on the blog. We'll put a link wherever you are.
Yeah.
In the description on YouTube, in the posts on the blog page. We've solved all of the problems that come with pre-production. Now let's go into actually making the podcast. And we found some cool stuff actually, didn't we, David?
I'm trying to remember this part of the prep. I'll be honest.
Well, let's cut and work it out.